r/NoSleep. Posted by u/CIAHerpes. Our mall collapsed during an earthquake. There were creatures in the fissures not from this world. My child came running up, his eyes frantic and wild, his little baseball cap pulled down low over his constantly bobbing head. "Daddy! Daddy!" he cried, the toy racks next to him glittering with brand new merchandise. The fluorescent lights shone brightly overhead as customers pushed their full shopping carts and constantly checked their phones. I gave Stevie a faint smile, but his expression looked afraid. A splinter of ice pierced my chest. "What?" I asked, leaning down. "What's wrong, Stevie?" I nervously fingered the keychain in my pocket, feeling the canister of police mace hanging there. "The man says we must run. We have to go outside. Right now. Come on, let's go." He started tugging my arm, trying to pull me towards the exit. I looked down at my cart, frowning. "Bud, I still have more shopping to do here, and I haven't even paid for my stuff," I said. "We can't just leave." "What man are you even talking about?" Stevie pointed behind him at blank air. "The man with blood coming from his eyes and mouth says we need to leave," Stevie insisted. "Listen, Bud, there's no one there. Why don't you just—" I started to say, but a strange sound cut me off, like a giant the size of a mountain groaning in his sleep. The sound seemed to pass under our feet and throughout the structure itself in strange, eerie vibrations, like some ill-omened whale call. The department store's lights flickered. The shelving started to wobble as the first windows shattered near the front. I picked up Stevie and started for the door, my heart hammering. Stevie's pale face kept turning this way and that, glancing around nervously for something. His words kept running through my head. The bloody man no one else besides Stevie could see told him we needed to leave. How did Stevie know something was about to happen? Was there really a man who warned him? I only had a few seconds to wonder. Customers all around me dropped what they were holding, looking up at the ceiling or down at the vibrating floor. They stood around like cows in a thunderstorm, their mouths agape as dust and debris trickled down on their heads. The lights and electricity burned out with sizzling and popping sounds for the final time. A smell of burning plastic filled the air. And then the roof started to cave in, and the ground opened up below us like a hungry mouth. I remember the blood-curdling screams coming from all around me as I fell. Many were cut off suddenly, like stars winking out at the end of the universe. Crystal and glass flew everywhere. Windows shattered as the cacophony of human shrieking seemed to reach a resonance with the death gasps of the building. Heavy blocks of concrete fell through the air all around me. They smashed into everything with a deafening cacophony. I wrapped my arms around Stevie instinctively, seeing him open his mouth to scream, but hearing nothing above the tumult of death. Something hit me hard in the head. I swam against the stunning currents of unconsciousness as my heart beat a frantic drumbeat in my chest. It seemed like it should explode if it kept beating so fast. The blackness fell over me like a swarm of locusts. It was total. I still held Stevie tightly in my arms, but whether he was hurt or not, I didn't know. I felt trickles of blood running down my scalp and forehead. I groaned. "Daddy?" Stevie's soft voice said next to me. It sounded choked and scared. I took a deep breath in, coughing on all the dust. "I'm here," I said. "Are you hurt? Can you move?" "Something hurt my arm, Daddy," he said. "It's stiff and it hurts and I think it's bleeding." "Is it broken?" I asked. "Can you move your fingers? Can you bend your arm?" "I can, but it hurts," he complained. I sighed, shaking my head, trying to clear it. I felt drops of blood go flying like raindrops on a shaking dog. I reached into my pocket, praying to God that my cell phone was not smashed. I took it out and hit the button. The dim glare of the home screen illuminated our little chamber. We were trapped in some small closet in the basement level, barely large enough for me and Stevie to stand inside. Giant, cracked blocks of concrete surrounded us on all sides. One loomed over our heads, skewed at an angle, hanging down like a guillotine blade ready to strike. Its corner had gotten stuck on a support, but it was barely hanging on by a fraction of an inch. I tried calling the police from the phone, but I couldn't get through. All the metal and concrete from the collapsing mall must have blocked the signal somehow. "Hello?" I cried into the concrete prison surrounding us. "Can anyone hear me?" My voice seemed parched and hollow. The cries felt eerie, like the wailing of a ghost in the dark night. Stevie's eyes looked wide and shell-shocked in the coffin-like enclosure. Is someone there?" A weak, Choked voice responded nearby. Please. Hello? Who's there? I asked. Are you okay? No. A big block landed on my chest. And I can't breathe that well. I'm stuck and I can't feel my legs. I took a deep, shuddering breath, wiping away the tears that dripped from my eyes. My name is Mary. I'm 68 and I live, or lived, 10 minutes north of here. Please, tell my family that. The voice grew weaker and sadder, fading off into incoherent silence by the end. Hello? I called out again. But this time, I got no response. All I could hear was the panicked breathing of myself and my son, buried alive in concrete and rubble. We stood tightly together, packed like sardines in a can. I kept shining the phone's light around, looking for anything I could move to get out of here. I found a small gap in the bottom corner, almost big enough for a child to crawl through. I started clearing the debris from around it, opening it up as wide as I could. From below me, I heard a strange, rhythmic sound as if a dog were digging furiously at a hole. I could hear the shuffling of dirt. Gurgling breaths rose up through the cracks, faint and rasping. There was a sweet smell, like the smell of infection and sepsis. It seemed to rise up through the cracks with a sound. Nearby, I heard a man start screaming. It was a blood-curdling shriek of agony and horror. Within seconds, it got cut off, but I thought I still heard him choking on his own blood. There were sounds of a struggle. Something smashed hard against the concrete wall to our left. I felt it shudder in its frame. Stevie trembled, hugging me tightly. It's going to be okay, bud, I said, not believing it myself. I knelt down in front of the small passageway I was trying to enlarge. I peered into a jungle gym of twisted metal. I tried to see any sign of sunlight or any potential path that would help us get out. Instead, I saw a face. It was a sunken face with ragged, broken teeth jutting out from its gums like broken tombstones. Its bone-wide skin clung tightly to its elongated, hairless skull. Its nose looked mostly eaten away. Only bits of red cartilage and destroyed tissue poked through. As I shone the cell phone's light in its direction, it ducked down behind a pile of broken shelving and smashed merchandise. Its white, raccoon-like eyes seemed to float in the air for a moment before fading into nothingness. Dad? Stevie asked behind me, trying to peek around my chest. Did I just see someone? I put my arm up protectively. I heard the creature skittering through the rubble. Its low breaths echoed through the air, hissing and gurgling like a dying snake. Stevie, stay behind me, I said as a pale, dead hand flitted in through the opening. I saw the wide, excited eyes of the creature gleaming in the dim light. Its mouth hung open in a hungry grin. I screamed, beating at the twisted fingers as they wrapped around Stevie's little leg with an iron grip. Stevie kicked and tried pulling away. Get away from us, I cried, trying to kick at the arm, but I had no room to pull my leg back. Stevie began to slip past me through the enlarged opening. I grabbed Stevie by the back of his shirt, yanking him back. He was caught in a tug-of-war. I feared his clothes would rip and he would fly away into the darkness and into the jagged, broken teeth of this abomination. The other hand came up and wrapped around Stevie's head. It pulled his face. Stevie opened his mouth wide and bit down on the long fingers probing their way across his cheek. The creature shrieked as dark blood ran down Stevie's chin. Its arms disappeared back into the hole. Within seconds, it had skittered away on all fours, crawling like some naked, demonic spider. I don't know how long we huddled there in the darkness and emptiness. I turned off my phone to preserve the battery. Occasionally, someone would start screaming or whimpering far off in the rubble. And I heard the soft digging sounds, as if a dog were burying a toy. Every few minutes, I would turn it on for a brief moment to make sure nothing was watching us through the opening. As the battery began to run low, I turned it on again and saw someone staring in. It was a man with blood streaming from his face. It covered his eyes like a crimson film, so dark that I couldn't see any sign of the sclera or pupil behind all the blood. He wore a gore-stained hospital gown. His stringy black hair fell over his forehead and face. He looked Asian and clean-shaven, perhaps in his 30s. "Daddy, look," Stevie shouted, pointing. "That's the man who tried to help us earlier." I simply gaped in astonishment at this strange apparition. "Where did you come from?" I whispered, wishing I could take a step back. I instinctively wrapped my arms around Stevie to protect him. "What are you? Who are you? Why did you try to help us?" The man's bloody eyes rolled wildly in his head. He groaned and sputtered, but no words came out. I wasn't even sure if he could hear me. Stevie tugged my arm. "Let me try," Stevie whispered softly, bending his small body as much as he could in the confined space. His innocent, wide eyes met the bloody, eldritch ones of our savior. Hi. Thanks for trying to warn us. I wish we had left. I felt a rising sense of guilt as Stevie spoke. It was my fault we didn't run. Now, if my son died, it would all be on my head. They crawl everywhere. The man rasped, his mouth open in a silent scream as blood dribbled down his face. The spatters made bright red drops on his hospital gown, bright and glistening over the dull sheen of gore. He pointed with a broken finger at the hole and then at Stevie. You must get out. They're coming. His crimson eyes widened for a moment as he pushed himself away from the hole. I kept my phone pointed at this crawling corpse, watching in horror and awe as it slithered down into the cracks in the darkness. Help me get out, Stevie said, trembling and sweating as he looked up at me. Maybe once I get out, I can help open up the hole so you can get out. I nodded. Painfully, we rearranged our bodies in the coffin-like enclosure. Stevie crawled through the opening in the debris with room to spare. He wriggled his way out, falling onto a portion of the original basement floor. The cold, gray concrete had cracks like the fissures of an earthquake running through it. I saw a particularly large one in the far corner that looked a few feet wide and ran 20 feet across the room. I continued trying to push nails, broken glass and pieces of wood and brick out of the way to enlarge the passage. Don't go far, Stevie, I hissed. He stopped, turning back to look at me. He had to crouch down. Shelving and shattered merchandise reached up to the ceiling. A tightness in my chest told me to rush. I kept pushing more and more debris, trying to crouch my body as low as I could. Finally, I decided to just go for it. I carefully pushed my phone through, keeping the light facing upwards since I wouldn't be able to use my hands. I shoved my head through, smiling warmly at Stevie. He returned it, but he glanced nervously behind him. The space was so tight I had to keep my arms by my sides. I started to push myself slowly forward with my feet. The opening felt like a birth canal of rubble. I felt like I was being born, exiting this steel and concrete coffin and moving toward life. I heard something shuffling and digging behind Stevie. A shard of ice pierced my chest as the subtle sound faintly echoed through the chamber. I tried to push myself through faster, but I felt stuck. My elbows and chest kept hitting the concrete. I exhaled all my air, gritted my teeth and pushed. Something sliced into my skin as I slipped out the other side. I felt warm drops of blood dripping from my arms, chest and back. But the waves of adrenaline kept me numb. I scrambled up, crouching low in the debris as I grabbed my phone. Stevie backed up toward me, looking at the darkness far off in the corner. A giant fissure ran through the floor, about 3 feet wide. Dozens of pale hands reached up. Wicked, yellowed nails hung out the end, each forming the shape of a cone that ended in a razor-sharp point. As I stepped forward, I saw a body next to the fissure, an old man whose entire head had been crushed by a heavy, concrete pillar. Yet someone had clearly also mutilated his body after death. I could see the chest hanging wide open with many of the organs removed. His button-up shirt and skin had been peeled back, like curtains opening on a stage. The broken ribs and mounds of gore rising up from his dead body revolted me. White, eldritch eyes peeked above the fissure. The clawed fingers pulled the naked body slowly up. They all grinned at us with sharp, broken teeth. I frantically dug in my pocket, feeling for the police mace. Get back! I screamed as I yanked it out and depressed the trigger, hitting the creatures from right to left. Those on the right were closest to us. The spray soared through the air, so thick it seemed more like a solid than a liquid. The mace hit the first of the creatures in its wide, excited eyes. Its grin faltered. Its mouth opened in a deafening shriek like the cry of a dying fox. It spun, heading back toward the fissure and skittering down. Its eerie cries followed it. Stevie ran behind me, wrapping his small arms around me. I continued spraying, trying to force them all back. Above me, I heard a tumult, as if someone were dropping concrete blocks on top of the ruins. Faint voices rang through the layers of debris. I kept spraying the police mace. With satisfaction, I watched it dribble over the eyes, nose and mouths of these creatures. The one on the far left skittered forward on all fours in a blur, grabbing Stevie by the ankle. I turned toward it as Stevie got yanked off his feet. Crouching low, I started to run toward the creature, watching in horror as it pulled Stevie toward the hole. No, I said, lunging forward and grabbing the thing's arm. I lost my keys and mace in the process. The creature turned its white, luminescent eyes toward me. Its ragged teeth gleamed in its gaping maw as it leaned forward and bit 2 of the fingers off on my right hand, my pointer and middle finger. The freezing, burning pain ran up my arm as I instinctively screamed. Another creature tackled us. The 4 of us fell in a heap. I kept streaming blood from my spurting hand. Then there was a ripping and grinding from above. Abruptly, bright sunlight shone through. I saw a face looking down at us. The creature's eyes widened in horror as they saw the sunlight rushing in. Hissing with pained cries, they released me and Stevie, slinking back to the hole and disappearing into the shadows forever. This case ended up getting international attention. Over 500 people died in the collapse of the mall. Apparently, the owner of the mall had taken out supports and pillars. He broke down random walls to open up more space, even when engineers told him not to. He went to prison for a while, but how much comfort is that to the 500 people who died? Of course, the official report is that all the deaths were from the collapse itself. No one wanted to listen to me when I talked about the creatures or the men with the bleeding eyes. I pointed to my mutilated hand and my permanently missing fingers. I even tried to find the rescuer who had first looked down through the opening, but no one would admit to seeing anything like the naked, pale creatures who had attacked us. But as they got me and Stevie out, I heard other strange rumors from the emergency responders at the Sampoong department store where this took place. Rumors that they had found a strange room in the basement where someone had been kept as a prisoner and tortured to death. Later on, I would see a picture of the man and realize it had been the Asian man with the bleeding eyes who had tried to save our lives.